the brand ambassador for Pinners. Cy Scott, nice to see you in Toronto. The light's going to go from dark to light in a second because we're pulling out of a garage. Have you been in a Rolls Royce before?
This is my first time in a Rolls Royce, although I've always had ambitions
Me
to be in a Rolls Royce. It's very cool, very cool. Does it have, Rolls are the cars that have like the umbrellas in the door, right?
Yes.
They do? Does this
But
one?
unfortunately, this one doesn't.
No.
Okay,
That got stolen earlier today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But it is, well, this one is also very distinctive. But we've been driving around in it for a couple of days, and people, like a lot of people take pictures, like you were taking pictures when we rolled up.
Mm-hmm.
And then people will sort of like take it on as their own. Like there were people earlier when Georgina was getting coffee. But like not leaning on it, but like, hey, like taking pictures of selfies as if it was their own car.
An Instagram magnet, I'm sure.
It's an Instagram magnet. And actually, I'm having a great time at the Lift & Co Expo. And one of the highlights is the car parked outside because people are like, it becomes sort of part of the show and one of the personalities there. So you're in town, obviously. You're with Headset, or you are Headset, or the CEO of Headset. What is happening in cannabis right now from your perspective? And does it vary from market to market?
It absolutely varies from market to market. And I mean, it's great to be back in Canada. It's been a couple years. I mean, since the pandemic, things have been pretty locked down.
Yeah, I'll
It's been
say.
tough. We're based in Seattle. We have a team in Toronto.
Yeah.
But we've been, just prohibited really from coming into the country. So it had been a while. And coming back, I think the last time I was here, there were maybe 5 stores in Ontario.
Right. I was going to say, that was a decade ago, and it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it couldn't be any different,
Yeah.
right? What is it, like 1,500 or
Oh,
something?
yeah, it's like
or
a ton.
1,500?
It seems like there's 1,500 on the street.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very different world, and I think different challenges because of that, and certainly it's market to market
Yep.
and the dynamics there. I think Ontario went from the OCS model to private retail to unlimited licenses and
Bananas.
yeah, now it seems like it's going to be pulling back a little bit as far as the companies that can stay afloat in this kind of situation. But I mean that's here. It's different everywhere, right?
Right.
New Jersey just started legal cannabis sales the week of 420, and there's 12 stores.
Right.
For a market like New Jersey. I mean, there's similar parallels, to the start of Canada or Ontario with limited retailers, but just different dynamics, right, all the time. So we could, I mean, any sort of category we could dive into.
Yeah.
Just the nuance.
I want to ask you a question because you, maybe more than most, have been to all the markets. There aren't that many to go to, but like, you've
More and more.
I know, but you've been to all of them a lot, is my guess, right? Like you've been to Colorado, you've been to California, you've been to obviously Ontario, and all the places that have legal markets. And are there places with more dense retail than Toronto? Like downtown is wild.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, most markets in the U.S. have a lot of zoning restrictions,
Right.
And I'm sure it's similar here, but you don't really get many shops like in the downtown corridor
Right.
or like Main Street.
Right.
But here, walking down like Spadina or
Yeah.
Queen Street West. I mean, on Spadina, you've got the Superette that's connected to an LCBO,
Right.
which is for those not in Canada,
Brilliant.
It's the like the alcohol, right? LCBO, right? So it's the only outlet for spirits, and it's connected. So you just don't see that in the U.S. So I think like real estate here is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And you're right, the density of it.
For now.
For now, yeah, that's certainly got to change. I mean, it's kind of like the great free market experiment.
Right. We had people in from the UK, and they're like, oh, it must be great for business that there's so many retailers. And I think you're going to tell me, but like the number of people buying cannabis has gone up. The number of people buying legal cannabis has gone up. The aggregate sales numbers have gone up,
Right.
but the per store sales cannot possibly be going up with so many stores.
Right.
And so it's very difficult for the producers as well, because the price compression. Like it is a challenging industry, and it's also in its infancy, so it doesn't have a 20-year track record of like leveling out, or this is a short-term blip. And like, how do you, when you look at sort of market to market, like, do you look at Ontario, for example, or Canada overall, and say, oh, this is where California was, 4 years ago, or is there no analogy that works like that?
I mean, there's always like analogies. I think it's just like how how tightly they fit.
Right.
Like, in a new market, you do see this rapid expansion of locations,
Right.
of products that are available, consumers coming into the category. I mean, like flower category, for instance, right? Always starts with the largest share,
Yeah.
and it continues with the largest share, but that share of sales goes from 70 to 80% at the start down to the 40s.
Right.
And that's really just, it's like a pattern we see all the time, and it's driven by things like availability of products, right? It takes
Right.
longer to build
Produce the rest of it, yeah.
Exactly, vape pens, edibles, and other categories. And so you see stuff like that. So when you look at markets like Ontario here, certainly we see parallels there. But I think every market is slightly nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Like product availability, like in Canada, the 2.0 products weren't available until
Right.
2020.
Yeah.
A couple
Right before
years-
COVID.
Right,
Like-
exactly. And you look at some of those growth rates compared to the U.S., like the growth of vapor pen or beverage, it's quite significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because it's a pretty new category, for this market.
Right.
So you can look. It's kind of like that. Like history rhymes kind of
Right,
analogy,
right,
right?
yeah.
It looks similar, but it's never like exactly the
Right.
same.
Do you think it will be like mature markets will look like X, where 40 to 45% is flower, 15 to 20% is pre-rolls, and then infused pre-rolls, and like, is that, or is it like California is just going to be different because the culture is different, New York's going to look different because the culture is different,
I think,
or too early to tell? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I think on a long enough time scale, things will look very similar.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that will depend on in the U.S. interstate commerce.
Yeah.
In Canada,
Yeah.
you can be a brand based in Ontario distributing to British Columbia
Yeah.
or Alberta.
We talked to one yesterday that is based here, isn't even in the OCS. They sell
Really?
all their product in BC, and that wasn't what they set out to do. It was just working with the provincial buyers, and they found an audience there, and like people just
Sure.
like their weed out there. Like
and they could sell here as
Right,
well,
yeah,
right? If they
yeah,
wanted to.
yeah.
And that's very different than the U.S., right?
Right.
If you're in California, it's very hard to go to Colorado.
Yeah.
Or very hard to go to
Right.
New Jersey.
especially with flower.
Especially, with
Right.
any sort of product,
Right.
because there's right, you're seeing these MSOs in the U.S., the multi-state operators that are starting to get some scale and bring their products, like Curaleaf is bringing
Yeah.
their select products
Right.
market to market, able to launch like one product line in
Across,
15
yeah.
states at the same time, which is pretty new.
Yes.
And I think if we see that continue, outside of interstate commerce, and you see more market share going to MSOs over time, that will start to blend some of those
I've never seen that.
variables.
Soul cannabis. Never, like they just pop
Amazing.
up.
You just, yeah.
They just pop, and like we're here all the time. This is the way to the downtown airport is right behind us, and we go by here all the time. I've never
there's
seen that
another
store.
one.
Yeah.
So that or interstate commerce, I think, and then you'll see, a consumer in California. Sure, there's cultural differences, but are they really that different
Right.
than a consumer in New York? I think it's just access to the types of products, the availability, the locations, and the stores that are open, and what they offer drives a lot of like those consumer preferences. So we'll start to see it blend more over time, but I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah. I want to ask you, because we have seen, because we are constantly on your website, like there are brands, not flower brands, but like actual, like let's say the Wanas and the Wilds and the well-known, certainly edible brands. Like it's obviously easier to move that brand because you don't have to move product, but like you move the brand,
Right.
and it does have resonance. I wonder if that resonance is based on the brand or based on availability. Like, is there a way to tell that, or it's just like they're better at getting to scale with their partners?
Yeah,
Countrywide, here.
I think it's mostly that they're better getting to scale countrywide with partners.
Yeah.
I think that we do see brand affinity, brand loyalty in certain markets. There are some like large brands in California that have a lot of repeat purchases, a lot of loyal customers, but you don't see that outside of the California market.
Right.
And this would be a brand that is very dominant, like in the vapor pen category in California, but it's also in the vapor pen category in markets like Washington State,
Right.
and it doesn't do well at all.
Right.
And it's really, I think, because it's licensed out to a partner, it's just a different
different
market,
thing, yeah.
different marketing in the market. So even though it's a very strong brand in one market, it doesn't always equate to a strong brand in the next market that can drive
Right.
that.
And it's really interesting because you think about a lot of the beverage people I find that are in the Canadian market now come from traditional beverage, a big
Sure,
beverage like
yeah.
Coke and Pepsi and alcohol and spirits, and they're super cognizant of what you just said. Like, you have to, the brand has to be the same targeting, same marketing, whether, and they use bottlers all over the world for that type of thing, but like the brand is always consistent. There's another one. Oh, that's actually an illegal dispensary right there.
Yeah,
Another problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
I used to come over here way back in the early days, and yeah, it's still around.
I know it's and I don't know what to do. I mean, this is not an intractable problem, but it's just, what are they supposed to do? Every time they close them down, they open up somewhere else, and like,
Yeah, it's wild.
I think it's less of a problem now than it was at the beginning, because there's so many legal stores.
New York has that same thing happening right now.
There's trucks.
Yeah, trucks.
We're in New York. I was like, there's like the shawarma guy, the coffee pastry guy, and the weed truck.
Yeah, there's like online menus. Like, you can pre-order and
Oh.
walk in. It's so sophisticated, right? Which is terrible.
It's gonna be hard to unravel that.
Exactly. I mean, if Ontario's still struggling with it,
Right.
I mean, in New York, it hasn't even started yet.
Right.
And Ontario's been at it for a couple of years.
Right, and there's very few repercussions, right? It's
Yeah. So this is where like things kind of rhyme, right?
Yeah.
So you guys are ahead, and you can like point to this and then show New York like, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Unless you take
yeah,
some
and do it
significant
quickly. Like,
action.
it's the
Right.
delay, like the policy. Like, regulators want to get it right,
Right.
but getting it quick is also important, right? Like, the gap between like decriminalization and a regulatory framework, like if it's 2 years, the gap of 2 years is just money making bonanza.
Yeah.
Like in New York right now.
And as a consumer, like, how are you really supposed to know?
Right.
Like, we're really close to it, and
Right.
we know the stores, we know the brands, but like, you know, you're just visiting or
Right.
whatever, and you see it, and you
Yeah.
want to walk in. You
It's a good location.
Here.
It's
It's
a
a great
great
location. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you're buying a list of products you didn't
Right.
even know.
Right,
Not
that's right.
tested.
Right.
That's crazy.
And the dosage, especially on edibles, is like,
Right.
is-
That's not good for the industry.
no. I want to ask you about a specific category. Like, obviously, we're in Pitter's Car. It's a small format pre-roll multi-pack, which I'm noticing a lot more. I think it's a great format for like bringing it to people's houses or sharing it. But is that a product of COVID? Is it a product that's just a good format, or are consumers like, this makes sense to me, so I don't have to like have a stinky half-smoked joint in my pocket?
Yeah. The pre-roll category in general is one of those categories where you look across the US and Canada, and it's very similar consumption preference, very similar sales. I think it's between like 11 to 14% of market share, which is pretty crazy, because you look at stuff like vapor pen. It's much more popular in the US right now than it is in Canada. Same thing with edibles, much more popular in the US than
Really?
in Canada. Yeah, edibles, I'm not super surprised. I mean,
'Cause the
when I look
dosage,
at
yeah.
your 10 milligram single serving packaging, it's pretty ridiculous.
Right.
Like, I know that there's a lot of work being done to kind of change
Yeah.
that to like 100 milligram.
Yeah, those
But
guys look at the car.
I do think that drives some of those nuance, but pre-roll is somewhat the same. So it's pretty interesting that is like the category. So I think that means it's got some stability, some staying power.
Yeah.
It is the number 2 category in Canada.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So I do think that it's not something that is like a fad or anything.
No.
I think it just is.
It's just this format's getting smaller. I feel like the 1 gram.
Oh yeah.
Like, not that it's awful. It's just very it's very big, right? Like, whereas the 0.25, the 0.4, like, it's just smaller and easier to get around.
Right. And you're right. COVID. I mean, you're not sharing as
Yeah.
much, right?
Right.
Like, you're not passing a joint around and pre-roll around.
But everybody gets their own now.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, that format makes a lot of sense. I know there are similar brands in the U.S. that have had a lot of success there. So
Yeah.
I think similar we'll see that happen here in Canada.
We
Or it's
went-
already happened.
We went to a grow like way long ago, right after legalization, and like went into their pre-roll room. And I was like, how many are you doing a day? They're like, we can't do enough. We're working around the clock. Like, and this was Alberta was the biggest market at the
Sure.
time. Like, they will buy every single joint that comes off this assembly line. And it was like they couldn't do enough.
Yeah, I've heard of organizations that are producing the papers.
Yeah.
And just the scale, across the U.S. and Canada, it's like insane.
Yeah. And actually these guys, I mean, also the honing of the engineering of like how to get it right every time and how to build that consistency. I mean, like I'm going to get the words wrong, but like the stuffing the cone, right? Like that's what I also like it's super nerdy. Like, how do you engineer the right joint, and then how do you get the filter to be right every time? And we last time we were in the car with John, who is Pinners, we like looked at the filter and like he's trying to get all the, like a spiral filter to get them all the same. Hey,
Oh,
I know
wow.
those guys. Hey, that's your crew.
That is my crew.
So yeah, so I mean, it is like the innovation that's happening on operation, like all those things from growing to pre-rolls to manufacturing to beverages is also interesting. And anything that you've seen in your travels that just seems so innovative, that maybe leading them, like maybe too soon, but you're like, this is so interesting or cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. I mean, wherever you're at, like I've gone into a number of locations here, and just the way the retailers are set up, is unique, and it's still exciting to see, those changes always happening, right? It's not settled. There's not like one way to sell cannabis. There's not one format or product that everyone's purchasing, today. I mean, it's still unwritten, right? And that's what's so exciting about the category, is like we're in the middle of it, kind of watching it, even though it feels sometimes like it's been here forever in some ways. I've been in the cannabis industry for 12 years.
Yeah,
at
your
this
old
point.
hat.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You think you started when you were 12?
Yeah. but it still surprises me, right? So I think we still have a lot
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, I think the same thing, like between shopping experience and new products, like I go into the stores, I'm like, oh, that looks so interesting and cool. And that's within the framework of like the Canadian regulations. Never mind when we were in like Las Vegas, and like the infused pre-roll category was like,
Right.
it was like 400 products. Like, how are they, like, where are they keeping all those products?
That's blowing up too in markets like California.
Yeah.
So we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, here too. I mean, it's interesting, and yeah, that's what I like about it. I mean, that's why it's an interesting industry, because it's constantly changing. New markets opening, old markets changing, and even old markets like California and Colorado, like things change all the time. Even from a regulatory perspective.
Oh, all the time.
Delivery, e-commerce, in-store,
on-premise consumption.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, there's a lot of on-camera.
Yeah, at the conference here.
I don't know if a cough made it to the microphone. So I really appreciate the time and the partnership and the insight, because that's obviously the most important that people want to hear from you guys. So thank you for your time. Thanks for joining me in the back seat of ROYCE, and we'll see you throughout the day.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I know I do some podcasting, and I do poolside podcasts at conferences, but I think this beats it.
We can get ROYCE within a couple 100-mile radius of here. So
okay,
next time you're around, we'll make it happen.
Let's do it.
Great. Thanks, Si.
Thanks, Jay.